I'll let you hold on to that. Afternoon. Wow. Yeah. All right, kids. It's about that time. In fact, it looks like I'm about 2 minutes late according to the clock on the wall back there. I tell you, I don't know about you. Well, I take that back. I know exactly how you felt when you pulled in tonight. You felt ecstatic, and I felt ecstatic. Man, it feels so good coming in on Wednesday night. I have been looking forward to this just as you have since the middle of December. And so I am glad we are back on track. Good to see everybody here. If you're tuning in online, thank you so much for joining us as we continue our look tonight at the book of Numbers. So we're going to finish Numbers. We just did one quarter. It is a 2-quarter study because we got like 24 chapters. And so that is awfully hard to do justice in 1 quarter. So we will do this quarter on Wednesday nights. Sunday, we are going to start, if you've seen the brochure, we're going to start a study on the book of Revelation. About 9 years ago, some of you were here. I did a Sunday night lesson series, sermon series on the book of Revelation. I can't believe that was 9 years ago. So I have never done it in class, and I've had several people, especially in the last couple of years, asking about Revelation. So I thought, well, it's a good time. And so we'll be doing that for 2 quarters. And we'll be having to take a chapter a week, which we will do. And so that's going to start Sunday in my Sunday evening class in here at 5 o'clock. Okay, well, let's turn to Numbers chapter 13 and 14. If you've got your Old Testaments, that is where you want to be. Numbers chapter 13 and 14 tonight. Okay, when we get to Numbers chapter 13 and 14, we are getting to the heart of this book. We are getting to the heart of really the Old Testament. This is not only the central event in the book of Numbers, it is one of the most important events in all of the Old Testament. You will find this event referenced in several Old Testament books, from Amos to the Psalms, and you will find it referenced in a couple of New Testament books as well, 1 Corinthians and Hebrews, the book of Hebrews. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go. What we're talking about, of course, is we are talking about Israel's apostasy in the wilderness. This is the story of the spies. And so let me get over there. I told you to turn to the book of Numbers. Let me get there myself, Numbers chapter 13. So it's the story of the spies. It's the story of Israel's negative reaction to the report, and it is God's response to their faithlessness. Okay, let's take a look at it. Let's start at the very beginning. In the first 16 verses, you have the selection of the spies. And we're told, as you get down into about verse 20, we know what time of year it is, because verse 20 says, as Moses is giving these spies instructions, and he says, what I want you to do, as he's given them their mission, he is telling them, first of all, check out the land. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it fertile? Are there trees? Give us a report on the land. Give us a report on the people. Are they strong? Are they weak? Are they few? Are they many? Give us a report on the communities. Are they communities that are open in nature, or are they fortified? So they've got to go throughout the land, and they have in their reconnaissance, in their report, they've got to do all of this. And then we're told in verse 20, he says, how is the land? Is it fat? Is it lean? Are there trees? Like I just said. And make an effort then to get some of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the time of the first ripe grapes. And so we're looking here about probably the middle of July to maybe the earliest part of August. So we're talking about right in the height of summer. So they are here on the border of the promised land. It is within their grasp. Now, as the spies are going to go out then and check out the land, there's going to be 12 of them. There's going to be one that is selected from each tribe. This is a Wednesday night group. You know the story there. One man is singled out. That's in verse 16, of course. Take a look at verse 16. And that is, these are the names of the men that Moses sent up to spy the land. But Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua. And so we certainly recognize Joshua's name. Why he is singled out here, we really don't know. Probably simply because of the prominent position he is going to eventually take as the leader of Israel. But why the name change, we don't know that. It was likely some kind of mark of a special favor. But nevertheless, it was a name change. So he's mentioned here. The Greek form of Joshua is Jesus, and which means salvation. The Lord is salvation. He's going to, as I said, ultimately replace Moses. Most of you know that as the leader of the Israelites when Moses dies. But you've got these 12 men who are selected now, and they have this mission that they are being sent to. Now, let me say one thing about this mission. You know, why are they even doing this? What's the purpose? I want you to hold your place here in Numbers and turn over to the book of Deuteronomy. Turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 1. Deuteronomy chapter 1. And look down at about verse 19. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 19. When you get to Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 19, here is Israel's history after the Exodus. Verse 19, Moses says, "Then we set out from Horeb and went through all that great and terrible wilderness, which you saw on the way to the hill country of the Amorites, just as the Lord our God had commanded us, and we came to Kadesh Barnea. I said to you, you have come to the hill country of the Amorites, which the Lord our God is about to give us. See, the Lord your God has placed the land before you. Go up, take possession, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has spoken to you. Do not fear or be dismayed." Then all of you approached me and said, "Let us send men before us, that they may each search out the land for us and bring back to us word of the way by which we should go up and the cities which we shall enter." The thing pleased me, and I took 12 of your men, one man for each tribe. So the question is, as I said, as we look at this at the very beginning of Numbers chapter 13, why gather 12 leaders, one from each tribe, and send them on this reconnaissance mission? Is it something that God wanted done, or is it something that was requested by the people? Was it, something that maybe was that God was granting a concession to their weak faith? Well, the passage that we just read in Deuteronomy chapter 1 looks like it's a concession to their weak faith. I don't know how else you can read that. I know the argument could be made that, no, this is just kind of wise precaution. You continue to see this anytime military, operations are undertaken. You'll see that in the book of Joshua. You'll see, Joshua sends, of course, the spies to Jericho. And then later on, you're going to see Joshua send spies to Ai. And, that's just normal military procedure. Well, yeah, I understand that. But, boy, Deuteronomy chapter 1, that's pretty strong. And so it really, to me, looks like it is a concession to the weakness of the people's faith. So they took it to Moses. They asked Moses, why don't we do this? Moses says, okay, we'll do that. And God authorizes it. And so we find the authorization of that here in verse 1 of chapter 13 of Numbers. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, send out for yourself men that they may spy out the land. So here God is authorizing it. But again, when you put Deuteronomy 1 together with Numbers chapter 13, it sure looks like it was something that was first of all presented by the people, and Moses said, okay, and God authorized it as well. If it really is kind of a concession to their weak faith, and I think it is, that weakness of faith is, as you know, about to be shown full blown. So they go out. Then these 12 men are gathered, and as I said, the verses 17 through 20 there, you've got the mission that they're to investigate and what they're to report on. And so then when we get to about verse 21, you have, it says, so they went up and they spied in the land from the wilderness of Zin. Now, if you're looking at a map, and if you've got one in the back of your Bible, and if you look at that, the wilderness of Zin kind of goes up to the southern end of the Dead Sea. If you go all the way down to the Dead Sea, and if you just kind of drew a line east to west, below that line is basically the wilderness of Zin. And so this is where they're at. And they're going to go, then it says, when they had gone up to the Negev, or they from the wilderness of Zin, as far as Rehob at Lebo Hamath. Now, we really aren't quite sure where that is. We know where the wilderness of Zin is. We don't know where that other location is. We know it's in the far north. Most scholars think it is either what will ultimately be called the city of Dan, which will be the northernmost city in Israel when they occupy the land of Canaan. Or it might even be Damascus, that area of modern-day Damascus. I forgot. Somebody can Google it for me. But like if you're standing in Israel, if you go to Israel and you go up to the far northern part of Israel in what's called the Golan Heights, and you're standing there, you can look over into Syria. And if I remember right, Damascus is like about 25 miles, Damascus, Syria. It's not very far from there. So either way, whether it is Dan or whether it's in the area more of Damascus, it's the far northern reaches of the land. And so as far as then the amount of travel that these 12 men would have done on this investigation, it would have been about 200 miles both ways. And so we're looking at about 400 miles round trip probably this mission took. It's going to take them, how many days? Threw the trivia out at you. Come on now. Come on. How many days did it take them to spy out the land? Huh? 40. Yeah, 40. Okay. So, they're doing this job, and, they're covering probably at a minimum of about 10 miles a day. That's pretty intense, especially when you think about the means of travel, what they were doing. They weren't just straight beeline. They were investigating as they went throughout the land, and so it was a pretty intense 40 days as they're going throughout the land. Now, if you look at the end of verse 22. There's a parenthetical statement. At least it's parentheses in the New American Standard, and it really kind of functions as a parenthetical statement regardless of what version you got. It says, now Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. And so, because at the beginning of verse 22 it says, when they had gone up to the Negev, they came to Hebron. And we're told that the descendants of Anak are there, A-N-A-K. And so Hebron is mentioned. Now, we really don't know why Hebron was kind of was mentioned here and almost singled out. But most think, and I'm inclined to think, that the reason is because of its significance to Abraham's life. Remember what we're talking about here. They are about to go to the promised land. This is the gift that God has been promising since Abraham in Genesis chapter 12. When God called Abraham up from Ur of the Chaldees, and he brought him over into the land of Canaan, and he said, "This is your land. I am going to give this to your descendants." And if you go back to Genesis, I'll show you the connection here. Go to Genesis chapter 13. Just hold your place there in Numbers 13. Genesis chapter 13, look down at about verse 18. Genesis 13, down at verse 18. This is when Abraham and Lot, they both had just prospered so much that it was impossible for them to keep their resources together, and they separated. And it says in verse 18, "Then Abram moved his tent and came and dwelt by the oaks of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord." And so here we find out this is where Abraham settled. And this is where he built that altar to the Lord. That would certainly indicate some very special significance of that place, as God is being honored there for the promise that he's made. And of course, God is fulfilling that. Now, as we continue on, look over into chapter 23 of Genesis. Chapter 23. Look down in about verse 2. This is Sarah. Verse 1 says Sarah, of Genesis 23. Now, Sarah lived 127 years. And then verse 2, she died and there is a name, Kiriath Arba. And then it says that is Hebron. This is where Sarah died. And so she dies here in Hebron. Look at chapter 25 of Genesis. Chapter 25, look down at verse 9. This is after Abraham dies. Then his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, facing Mamre, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth. There Abraham was buried with Sarah his wife. So Abraham lives there. Abraham dies there. Abraham's buried there. Sarah's buried there. And then if we just kind of keep working through this of the patriarchs, turn to Genesis chapter 35 real quick. Genesis 35, look at verse 27. Genesis 35, 27. Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre, and it says, of course, Hebron. So Jacob comes there to his father in Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had sojourned. Go over, finally, the last one we'll look at is Genesis chapter 50. Genesis chapter 50, we come to the end of Genesis, the last chapter in Genesis. Look at verse 13. Genesis chapter 50 and verse 13. Verse 12, this is when Jacob dies, and it says, of course, he's named Israel there. Verse 12, then his sons did for him as he had charged them, for his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, which Abraham had bought along with the field for a burial site. So you can see all through Genesis the connection here of the promised land to the patriarchs. And so as we get over here, and it says, as the spies are going out into the land, when they had gone up into the Negev, they came to Hebron. They know the significance of this. This is the land. This is it. This is what God has promised us. This is what God has been promising for 400 years. And so that's probably why Hebron is really mentioned here because of that connection. This is the fulfillment of God's plan. By the way, now it says the descendants of Anak were there. I don't know, you might have a footnote in your Bible, you might not, where Anak and what it literally means there. It means neck, and the idea here is tall And so what we're talking about here is he's letting us know that the people who settled there, the people around there, they're big people. They're big people. And that's going to kind of play into the report here in just a minute. It's going to be one of the things that terrifies all of the people is the size of some of the people. Now, are we talking about like giants, fee-fi-fo-fum type giants? No, we're not talking about that. The Bible's not a book of mythology. It's just talking about big people. There are some ethnicities that are just kind of naturally bigger than others. And it seems like, we're talking about a group of people here that were big. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. So look at verse 23. So they came to the valley of Eshcol. I bet you have a footnote there. If you do, somebody say what the footnote says. Cluster. The Valley of Cluster. And the reason it's called the Valley of Cluster is, so part of the mission is to bring back, bring back some of the produce. Is this land, what about the fertility of this land? What can we expect there? And so this is fascinating, verse 23. So they cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between two men with some pomegranates and the figs. So this single cluster of grapes is so big that two men have to carry it on a pole. I haven't seen a cluster of grapes that big. That's a big cluster of grapes. And obviously, what it's saying here is it's living up to the promise that God made about the nature of this land. That it is a land, and what's the language, what's the expression that we associate with the promised land? Yeah, the land flows with milk and honey. And that was a Hebrew idiom. It's used, you'll see it in many places in the Old Testament, that that idiom speaks to the fertility of the place. So this tremendous fertility. And you can see it really emphasized here. And like it says in verse 24, that place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster which the sons of Israel cut down from there. Okay. So for 40 days, they have explored the land from the south end to the north end. They've covered a minimum of 400 miles in their investigation. And now it's time to bring the report, to bring it to Moses, to bring it to Aaron, and to bring it to the people. And so that's what they do. Look at verse 25. When they returned from spying out the land at the end of 40 days, they proceeded to come to Moses and Aaron and all the congregation of the sons of Israel. And they brought back word, it says to them, to all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And they said, look at verse 27. We went into the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey. And this is the fruits. Wow. It is spectacular. That is the consensus. It is a tremendously fertile place. But the next thing they say is the people. Just look at verse 28. Nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong. You wanted us to tell you about the people. Are they? Do they look weak? Do they look like they can easily be taken? Do they look like there would be much resistance? No. These are clearly strong people who live there. Because the land has to be taken. It's occupied. God promised the land, but it has to be taken. And so they say, and the cities, then in verse 28, they are fortified. These are walled cities and very large. And he says, moreover, listen, that's not all. We saw the descendants of Anak there. Take a look at Deuteronomy. Flip back to Deuteronomy. I mentioned, I said these are tall folks. They're big folks. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 2. We could go to a couple of places, but we'll just go here. Deuteronomy chapter 2. Deuteronomy chapter 2, look down at about verse 10. Then the Lord said to me, verse 9, do not harass Moab. Do not harass Moab, nor provoke them to war. Excuse me. For I will not give you any of their land as a possession, because I have given Ar to the sons of Lot as a possession. The Amimed lived there formerly as people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim. The Anak, you see the word Anak there? Im is a Hebrew plural there. And it's tall, great, numerous. Leola, will you do me a favor? In my desk, I have got a bug in my throat, not a literal one. But in the bottom drawer on the left, there's some cups. And if you don't mind, fill me up a cup of water. Thank you, babe. Okay, so here, as you see, even here, he mentions people as great and as numerous and as tall as the Anakim. If you look at verse 21, he repeats it. A people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim. And he says, but the Lord destroyed them before them, and they dispossessed them and settled in their place. So here's just a couple of places where you'll see that reference. These were great, strong, tall people. They would have been intimidating warriors. And so the report, this initial report is, oh man, the cities are strong, they're fortified, they're walled, and the Anak are there. And so, thank you, sweetheart. Just what I needed. Okay. So the Anak are there, the descendants of Anak are there. And so that's the report. Now, obviously, this sent the people into just a frenzy. And we know, I think that's implied in the beginning of verse 30 here. Then Caleb quieted the people. The fact that Caleb had to quiet them down suggests that, they're freaking out. I mean, with the report that, hey, it's a land flowing with milk and honey, that lifted them up. And then with everything else in the report, it terrified them. So as I said, if the whole spy thing, the reconnaissance mission was a concession to their lack of faith, now you see that lack of faith on full display. So Caleb then, one of the 12, quiets the people before Moses and said, wait, no, we should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we will overcome it. He doesn't deny what they've said. It's true. Everything they've said is true. Yes, the people are strong. Absolutely. Yes, the cities are large. Yes, they're fortified. Yes, the descendants of Anak are there. Yes. But let's go up. And if we will go up, we will surely overcome. Now, the reason he's able to say we will surely overcome is because of what he's going to say in verse 8 of chapter 14. Caleb says, if the Lord is pleased with us, he's going to bring us into the land and give it to us. Caleb is saying, it's not about us. It doesn't matter what's out there. It doesn't matter who's there. It doesn't matter how strong they are. It doesn't matter about the fortified cities. If God is for us and with us, we win. It's that simple. So Caleb is trying to say, no. So he presents the minority report. You have the 10 spies presenting the majority report, and you've got Caleb. Now, Joshua is not mentioned here, but he is going to be mentioned in verse 6 of chapter 14. And so you've got those two presenting the minority report here. And so, he says, we can do this. Well, the 10 aren't going to take that. We 10 are in agreement. And so they interject. And they say in verse 30, but the men who had gone up with him said, we're not able to go up against the people, for they're too strong for us. So they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report. Does anybody else's translation there in verse 32 say anything other than a bad report? Or does everybody say a bad report? Anybody say a false report? Okay, discouraging report. Really, the most accurate is a false report. Which would certainly be discouraging, which would certainly be bad. But the idea is they gave a false report. So now, they're going to bail out. They've got to back up what they've said. And so they said, the land through which we have gone and spying it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people whom we saw in are men of great size. There it is again, talking about the big people. It is a land that devours. Now, we really don't know what they have in mind there. Maybe they're saying it is a place of constant warfare, because it is such a fertile place. Hey, if you've got something good, people want it. It's always been that way, and it'll always be that way. You got something good, somebody's going to want to take it. And so maybe that's what they're talking about. Or maybe they're just talking about some other things. When they say it's a place that devours, there's too many dangers there. There's too many difficulties. You can't really thrive there. Well, that contradicts everything they've said already. Because they said it's a land that flows with milk and honey. Cities are large and fortified there. The people are strong there. Sounds to me like you can thrive there. A lot of people are thriving there. But they're not interested. Again, it's a false report. They're trying to save face. They don't want to go. They don't believe. They don't have any faith. And then he says, in verse 33, there we also saw the Nephilim. The sons of Anak are part of the Nephilim. And again, we're not going to explore the whole idea of the Nephilim, but basically what it means, and there's about 3 references in Scripture that show that, it really is a reference to like a warrior class, a warrior society. Some societies are just more warlike, and down through history. And they were a warlike society. So, and we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and we were in their sight. That's what they thought of themselves. And we said, and I'm sure that's what they thought of us. There's no way. We are pathetic, and we are puny, and we are helpless, and we are hopeless against such a mighty, mighty people. Well, look at verse 14 now. Chapter 14 now. So all the congregation lifts up their voice, and they start crying. They're terrified. And all the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation, they start remembering how fantastic Egypt was again. This is the nature of people. Wasn't it great? Oh, man. Remember how great Egypt was? Oh, wow. That was living down there in Egypt. It is amazing. It is amazing how people remember things. It was awful in Egypt. And whatever they had, some kind of security and some kind of nourishment, the price was heavy. They were slaves. But they're remembering it fondly. Oh, if we could have only died in the way. Why is the Lord, verse 3, bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become plunder. Now they're just getting blasphemous. They're blaspheming God. God wants to kill us. God loves them. God has delivered them from Egypt. He's provided them with everything they need. And they're accusing him of wanting to harm them. So they said to one another, verse 4, we need to appoint another leader. We need to go back to Pharaoh. We need to go back to where it was really good. And Moses and Aaron, they fell on their face in the presence of all the assembly of the congregation of Israel. So what happens next is Joshua here and Caleb then, and this is that section we looked at just a second ago, they tore their clothes in verse 6, and they start trying to talk sense into the people. And, don't rebel against the Lord. The Lord is for us. He's going to deliver this. And look at the verse 10. This is the response of the people. But the congregation said to stone him. Just to kill him. Okay, they wouldn't be persuaded. Let's kill him. Let's kill these two idiots. Let's kill them. Well, at that moment, before anybody could kill anybody, God intervenes. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will this people spurn me, and how long will they not believe in me despite all the signs which I have performed in their midst? Dwayne Stubblefield and I a couple of days ago were talking about something, and we talked about this. We talked about, the nature of people, and how could they have ever doubted? I mean, they literally walked through the Red Sea, and they looked at each side as walls of water. They watched it open up. And they saw all the plagues. And when they grumbled for food, they stood knee deep in quail. They saw all of that. And it goes to show you, it's the same with, in the life of Christ. As people saw what he did. And then there were some people like Nicodemus who had said, nobody can do what you're doing unless God's with him. And then there's others that go, no, he's got a demon. God has given them every reason to have total confidence. God never asked them to have blind faith. He has given them the evidence to support their faith is overwhelming. And God says, I'm done. I'm going to kill them all. I'll just because of time, I'll just summarize it now. He tells Moses, I'm going to kill everybody, and I'm going to start all over with you. Now, this is not the first time this has happened. This is the second time God tells Moses, I'm going to kill them all, and I'm going to start all over with you. Moses is an amazing man. Moses always has the best interest of his people at heart. Moses is amazing. Moses doesn't want God to start all over with him. Most leaders of nations today would probably jump at that. Yes, start all over with me, Because for most leaders, honestly, it's mostly about them. I really don't think they care of what our country looks like 50 years from now or 100 years. I really don't think they care. I really, truly don't think they care. I think they care about their power right now. And whatever can enhance their power now. Whatever happens, I don't care. I want power now. Moses was nothing like that. And so Moses threw himself before God in a bold argument, begging God not to do this. And basically he says two things. Number one, and it's for our benefit, it's for the people's benefit, it's for Moses' benefit, but he says basically, listen, your glory is at stake. Your honor is at stake. The nations around will think that you can't keep your promise. Your honor matters. And then the second thing that he says is your nature. You're a God of forgiveness. and grace. And God says, okay, I forgive them. Now, what he meant by I forgive them is I'm not going to do what I said I was going to do and kill everybody. Now, there's still going to be consequences, but God's not going to destroy the nation and start all over with Moses. But what he does say is this. He says, every faithless member of this generation, Joshua and Caleb are the only ones of this generation that were different. But everyone 20 years old and up, they're going to die in the wilderness. They didn't want to go into the land? Okay, I'm granting their request. They don't get the land. And he said, that's what's going to happen. And then he says, or not, he didn't say it, but he just does it here. You'll see it at the end of chapter 14 there. The 10 spies in verse 37 is they're killed instantly. The 10 faithless spies who gave this false report and bad report and just further degraded the faith of the people, they were killed instantly. And then Israel, they repented. Verse 39. The people mourned. They realized, oh no, we're sorry. We're going to go up. And God told Moses, no, you take the people back now. You head south to the Red Sea. And the people go, no, we're going to show now. We're going to show our faith now. Moses goes, no, you can't. No, you can't do that. If you do that, you're disobeying God again. No, we're going to go. And so they went. Moses didn't go with them. The ark didn't go with them. God wasn't with them. And they were absolutely just crushed by the people of the land. Okay, so ends, as I said, the most central story in the book of Numbers and one of the most important stories in all of the Old Testament. Now, let's make some application real quick. You know, there's a lot of lessons. I don't know. I wish we had time. We got about 5 minutes that we can talk about lessons. I'm going to just list, without developing these, I'm just going to mention a few. And then you can throw out some too. The first one that I wrote down was we can't overcome our enemies alone. We can't. That's the first lesson. It's just impossible. Remember what Caleb said? If the Lord is with us, it's ours. We can't do it on our own. They tried that at the end, and they completely failed. Now, our greatest enemy, obviously, is death. And when I think about overcoming our enemies, I think of especially our ultimate enemy. There's no way. We're as helpless before what waits us, death, and what waits for us beyond. We're as helpless as the people of Israel were at the end of Numbers chapter 14. We cannot overcome our enemies alone, but with God we can. Second thing is, it reminds me that giants are no match for God. You saw that recurring. Giants are there. Hey, giants are there. Hey, did we tell you there's giants down there? Well, have you heard? There's giants over there. They're no match for God. You know, whatever the giants that we face in our lives that seek to weaken us spiritually, they're no match for God. God can handle it if we will rely on Him. A third thing that I'm reminded of is when we're dealing with God and our relationship with God, there is a point of no return with God. You know, the people here got to the end, and God said, "That's it. It's done." And they're like, "No, we're really sorry now. We're sorry now. We're going to go up. No, it's too late. It's too late. There is a point of no return. Now, that point of no return for us is death. When we die, that is it. You know, I know there are some groups who actually teach you get second chances. No, there are no second chances. That's it. There is a point of no return. And that reminds me of another lesson. Number 4, and it's very similar to this, is God's patience does have an end. God is incredibly patient. But his patience does have limits. Still another one is we can fall away. We don't have time tonight, but 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and Hebrews chapter 3, chapter 10, 1 through 5, Hebrews chapter 3, beginning in verse 7, going through chapter 4 and verse 13, in both of those texts, this account is being held out for us to learn, because we can fall away. Don't be like them. Don't be like them. And so we can fall away. Another thing that I'm reminded of, there's an expression here. I wish we had time to develop it more. But verse 24 of chapter 14 says about Caleb. But my servant Caleb, God says this, because he has had a different spirit and has followed me fully. I love that expression. Followed me fully. That is what we all should aspire to. I think there's a lot of half-hearted following God. You know, I'll follow him when it's convenient, or, when I think God's right on this. Follow me fully. That was the spirit of Caleb. Whatever God said to do, Caleb, that's what he did. This is a statement that should describe everything that we should be all about. And finally, the 7th one I jotted down was this. We need to stand for truth even if we have to stand alone. And I'm reminded there of Joshua and Caleb. None of the other spies backed them up. The people, they couldn't persuade the people. The people wanted to stone them. And they just stood firm. This is who we are. It's who we are. I was listening to a podcast by Albert Mohler, the president of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. If you like a podcast, you need to get his. It's one of the best. He has a briefing every day. It's like 30 minutes long, in which he takes headlines of the day. He's an expert in worldview, and he takes the headlines of each day, and he kind of breaks them down and analyzes them from a Christian worldview. And he was talking about a couple of days ago headlines in like the New York Times or something, where it said Bethany pivoted. Bethany Christian Services was a child organization, adoption, everything. And in Massachusetts, the state basically said, if you want to do business with us, you're going to have to drop your definition of what a family is, a marriage is between a man and a woman. And they did. And they did. And Albert Mohler said, and I really appreciated Dr. Mohler, he said, people would, basically, I'm paraphrasing him, people would justify, well, kids need to be served, and so if we had to do that to serve kids, then you got to do what you got to do. Mohler said, absolutely never. Never. You don't abandon Christian teaching for anything. You don't abandon it for anything. If you do, authentic Christianity is on its way out. You stand. Even if no one else is standing for the truth, whatever it costs you, we stand. Well, I know we're basically out of time, but can you think of, that's a couple minutes. In any other lessons? There's 7. Kevin. Yeah, they were at Sinai for a little over a year. By the time they left Egypt until they got up here, it was actually about 2 years. And so it really was, God tacked 38 years onto it already. So there would be 38 more years in the wilderness to bring it up to 40. So it was a couple of years. So they've been a couple of years since leaving Egypt. No, you're right. Yep. Anything else? Well, listen, thank you so much for being here. I am so glad to be here. I'm so glad to be looking at you rather than a black lens on a camera. It's so much more enjoyable. Listen, have a great rest of the week, and Lord willing, I'll see you all on Sunday.